I'm Dr. Adam AgrAbility with the Heroes to Hives program, and this is Heroes in the Field, a Heroes to Hives podcast. In this podcast, we speak with military veterans around the United States who have transitioned from protectors of our national security to protectors of our food security as the next generation of American beekeeper. This podcast is brought to you by Michigan Food and Farming Systems Veterans and Agriculture Network and the Heroes to Hives program. Welcome to Heroes in the Field. I'm Dr. Adam AgrAbility, and today we're sitting with Joe Ricker from Purdue University and AgrAbility. Thanks for joining us today, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. So when we do these podcasts, I always like to start with learning a little bit about your military history. So can you tell us a little bit about your military service, Joe?
Sure. So I started out of ROTC in 1992. Was a reserve officer working for a dispatch center in Naperville, Illinois. Went active guard and reserve, in 97. And then after 9/11, I had some pretty cool assignments. When 9/11 happened, I was in West Virginia, supporting reserve guys, and that was kind of crazy being in West Virginia, just that alone. It's a great state, though. I love West Virginia. And then after that, I deployed twice. I went to Afghanistan, where I was stationed in Uzbekistan and Mana Sharif, and we would fly supplies from Uzbekistan into Mana Sharif to support a Jordanian hospital, which is pretty cool, helping the local people. Yeah. I was qualified to logi, so I didn't get to do the really fun stuff, but I got to do some stuff.
Nice.
And then after that, came back for a year, and then my unit got deployed again to support special operations in Iraq. So I went to Iraq with SOF, and then after that, I had a tour in the Pentagon for 6 years, supporting special ops. A couple rounds in D.C. up to Fort Dix, and then out to Indiana. Then somebody got silly and decided to promote me to colonel. So I'm still trying to figure out how that happened, but it happens, right? And then I went back to the Pentagon for 3 years, and and even that time frame, just a couple of years, you think about what's going on between COVID.
Wow.
It's almost like being deployed at times.
Yeah.
And then I decided to retire and help out veterans getting into agriculture and the like. My wife decided I'd never really retire, though.
That's a true individual from the military, right?
Yeah.
You just never retire.
You just never retire.
You're just always doing the work.
I think your brain is just focused on having to do stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And so you got to do something. You just can't sit there.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a few cool things that you've done. What I always ask, what is a kind of one of the coolest or craziest stories that you can share with us? Obviously, part of special operations, you may not be able to share lots of stuff, but you may be able to share something.
So I have two of the fondest memories I have. One is just flying over Iraq with your legs hanging over the side of a Black Hawk in the wind with the door open. You kind of feel the song from Apocalypse Now going in the background.
Wow, yeah.
And then you hear the flares go off.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you pull your legs back in. But it's just, just having that freedom and kind of being in that mindset with your buddies is just fantastic. And then I'm always proud of bringing home my troops.
Absolutely.
Right? So you deploy with your troops. You're happy when you can bring them all home, safe and healthy, and they can move on with their lives. And that's probably my number one, good feeling out of the military.
Yeah, that's a great accomplishment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As an officer, definitely bringing your troops home is an important part of what you all do.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do. That's kind of the goal.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about agriculture. So you mentioned, you've done all this work in the Pentagon, special operations, all this kind of stuff. You get out, and where did agriculture come into that equation?
So it was funny. I thought I was going to retire a lieutenant colonel in Indiana. So when I was, told I was not going to make the next rank, I started looking in the Midwest for a farm. I did not want to go to the standard GS job. I love people that can do that. I just could not do any more government work. I didn't want to work for Microsoft or Amazon or any of those big companies. I think I was tired of being told, even from the bigwigs, what to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I wanted a little bit of freedom. So I decided when I moved to my last PCS, change of station, and I moved to the Midwest, I wanted to get some land just to have some peace.
Yeah.
So, I could tell all the veterans, it's always good before you make your last move to decide what you want to do agriculturally.
Yeah.
So I had this big plan that I was going to have alpacas and mini cows and blueberry bushes and apple trees and bees.
Yeah.
Bees, of course, are in there. So then I bought some land that I thought would support that. You start digging in the ground about 2016, 2017, and then you find out that you don't have the pH for the blueberry bushes. You find out there's no money to be made in alpacas, and that you got to really keep up and wake up and take care of them. So I narrowed that down to apple trees and bees.
Nice.
In about 2017 when I moved into the house. And then funny enough, I met AgrAbility.
Yeah.
So I went to an AgVet event that they were having. I don't think it was AgVet then. It was an AgrAbility veteran event, and I met my predecessor Cindy Chastain there. It was on a farm in Indiana called Tuttle's Orchard. I thought that was pretty cool. Funny enough, I did not make the bee event they had 2 months later because I was a reservist. I was full time with the reserves, so I had duty that weekend, and I sent somebody in my place. So
nice.
But yeah, that's kind of how I got. And then after I let my house loan my house out to people while I was in D.C. my last trip at the Pentagon, and then I fell back into it. So it was nice because apple trees takes about 5 to 6 years to grow. So the apple trees are nice and mature now.
Beautiful.
And I'm really trying not to be a bee haver and become a beekeeper.
Yeah.
We'll know that in a couple days with the weather.
As those bees are emerging from winter, absolutely. Yeah.
They were emerging a month ago, which worries me.
Beautiful. Well, at least they were alive a month ago. They were alive a month ago. That's a good sign. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk then a little bit about bees. So you talk like you're interested in kind of livestock and production apples, and kind of bees were a thought too. Now you are actually running beehives. Yeah, so kind of, how has that impacted you? Do you see bees as kind of like an activity that you're enjoying on a regular basis? Is it doing anything for you personally? Or?
So bees are super interesting, right?
Yeah.
So they make you focus.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not focused, I've actually, since I've had hives, because I even had hives back in 2017, and then I let somebody watch them while I was gone, and I came back. But after a couple of years of really doing the hive, you start to really pick up the tones of the bees.
Yeah.
And you can kind of know when you upset them.
Oh yeah.
and you'll know when they're starting to rally. I mean, and the reason I got into bees is because there's a lot of soft guys that are in bees.
Yes. Yep.
And which is really strange. Again, why would a soft guy get into bees? And so I said, hey, I got to try this, and it really does refocus you and put your mindset on where you're at.
Yeah.
And everything around you kind of drops around, because if you listen to the trucks going by, then you don't hear the bees.
Yeah.
You got to hear the bees. You got to kind of sense what they're doing, and it's kind of neat to try to get to the point of not having to use the smoker as much.
Yep.
And doing other things. In fact, funny thing I started doing after I started taking Heroes to Hives was the gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is nice because it's more tactile to use the latex gloves or
yeah. That's one of the things that we talk about pretty extensively in the Heroes to Hives course when we're talking about handling of bees, is that those big leather gloves, those beekeeping gloves that everybody gets, is when they start beekeeping, myself included, we all get these big beekeeping gloves because we want to protect ourselves. But the reality is that good beekeepers need to have that dexterity. They need to have that tactile sensation, because what you're doing is you're trying not to disturb the bees. You're trying not to crush the bees, and it's hard to do when you got those big leather gloves on, because you don't feel anything.
Yeah,
you just crush things, and they get stuck on things. So that transition from that to a latex or nitrile, and people talk about going gloveless as well. I we do that as well. But I think one of the things I really like about the nitrile or latex option is, and we talk about this in the course, is the biosecurity standpoint of that. If you hit a diseased hive, you can take those gloves off, throw them away, put a fresh pair of gloves on before you get in that next hive. Yeah. And so it gives you that ability to control that biosecurity in a very meaningful way, while also making you better at hive handling.
Yeah.
So it's a really great opportunity to hone those skills with that tactile sensation.
And people think you get stung through the gloves, and you don't.
Yeah, they really don't recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really just as often as you would, because I've gotten stung, through leather gloves as well.
Oh yeah, it happens.
And it happens, right? Or you bend over and you got a wet spot on the back of your pants.
Oh
right?
Yeah.
And the bees get after that, and it's just part of beekeeping. But it's kind of the cool part, right? because it's just, and somehow that comes back to the military and probably getting smacked upside the head in the military, right?
Yeah.
Hey, dummy, you need to start listening again, right?
So that's also kind of, you mentioned like the soft guys, like there's a lot of soft guys in beekeeping, and we've had a ton that have gone through the Heroes to Hives course. We've got one that's a trainer in Michigan, and one of the things that he tells me, as someone who has spent over 5 years in combat, spent over 20 years in the military, both in the Marines and in the Army, and this individual tells me that it's the adrenaline rush. It's the being around venomous insects that makes him feel normal, that he needs that kind of heightened level because he's used to being in those stressful situations. And so, for me, I've always thought of beekeeping as like the therapeutic calming, like I got to be mindful, I've got to be patient, I've got to be slow, and all these things. And then when I was talking to this individual, Clint Ward, who's one of our trainers in Michigan, he says the exact opposite. It's what brings me up and makes me feel normal. And so it's interesting that bees can be lots of things for lots of different people.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And it's pretty fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about AgrAbility and your role in AgrAbility. So for those of us that have been in the Heroes to Hives course, we talk about AgrAbility quite a lot. We have a whole session, a whole lecture on AgrAbility, a recording from a workshop that we've done previously with AgrAbility. And I've been an AgrAbility client for the last 10 years. And AgrAbility, I'll tell this point blank to our listeners, I would not be farming if it weren't for AgrAbility. I have many disabilities, both from the military and from a car accident, and I couldn't do what I do without the work that AgrAbility has helped me with. So, Joe, what is your position at AgrAbility, and can you talk a little bit about what AgrAbility does?
So AgrAbility is a USDA NIFA funded, which is a sub-organization of USDA. That it's grant funded, and if you don't know the land grant institution process, every state has a land grant institution. In Indiana, it's Purdue, and so they put in for the grant, and the national program is ran out of Purdue. And what AgrAbility does is it helps somebody who has either grown into a physical challenge, like arthritis or something like that, or who has a sudden accident like a loss of limb or something like that, and helps them continue on in agriculture. So it's wide enough that it doesn't necessarily have to be a veteran, but anybody that has had that. And it also helps to be that go-between interpreter between what agriculture needs, because it has a lot of expertise from Purdue there to say, hey, this is a way you can do things differently or more ergonomically. A lot of people look at ergonomics from an office setting, and not from a farm setting. So it really looks at ergonomics from a farm setting and how can things be done differently. And then if you have loss of limb, it's got some connections to some private organizations that can provide lifts and other things. So that's just a beautiful program to be with because you're just helping people. So
absolutely,
after many years in the military of trying to shape people and trying to get people to do things and stuff, it's nice just having that focus of that one individual getting to the next level. It's really a nice thing. Like yourself, I mean, it's great to see that it was able to help. And you can self-apply too. I'm 54 years old, 90% VA disabled. My shoulders are horrible, but I've learned a lot from AgrAbility and just little simple things like the director, Dr. Fields, told me one day, he said, hey, just put a hoe in back of your truck to grab onto the things way back there, and you don't have to climb into it.
That's a brilliant idea.
It is, and it works great. Your $10 hoe, you just put it in back, and that way you don't have to go grab that cement up there. You can just reach for it and stuff. So they have simple ideas like that all the way to larger ideas.
Absolutely.
And then I'm the veteran outreach coordinator. So AgrAbility took on, probably about 10 years ago, I might be a little off on timing, veterans as beginning farmers. So, and as well as I do, the past few farm bills has really started to define veterans in USDA as socially disadvantaged or other things. And so AgrAbility took that on as well. So I do their veteran outreach, and I take phone calls all the time from veterans that say, I would like to get into agriculture. How do I do it? And so I kind of just give them some guidance and some mentorship, and if I can, I'll give them either a qualified program or the state AgrAbility project to continue on. It's good to see those that succeed, and a lot of people leave and they just want to explore their options, and it's good to give them just a good discussion to say, hey, this is kind of excuse me, what agriculture is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as AgrAbility goes, and I'll kind of share a little bit about kind of the process just from a client standpoint. So, in addition to the Heroes to Hives program, my wife and I had run a 40-acre diversified farm in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I have been working with AgrAbility. I worked with Ned Stoller in Michigan right when I came to Michigan and started our beekeeping business. And the reason was because I had a back, knee, and ankle injury from the military that limits my ability to lift things. And Ned came out and did an amazing assessment. And that's one of the, I think, the most powerful mechanisms of AgrAbility is it's actually a personal connection. Mm-hmm. It's someone that physically comes out to your place, does an evaluation with you, sees kind of what you do day to day, and then makes recommendations to help you work with your disabilities.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very powerful thing. And I know for me, I had that first experience 10 years ago with Ned, and then we've been working together with AgrAbility and Heroes to Hives for that full decade. But I knew because of the experience that I had initially with AgrAbility and all the great work I've seen you all do all over the United States with individuals, that you allow them to continue empowering themselves to be themselves and do the work that they want to do, which is farming. And when I had my car accident in 2021, immediately when I realized that my injuries were permanent and they weren't going to go away over 6 months or 2 years or whatever it was, I immediately knew I needed to call AgrAbility and Ned to get him up there to do an assessment with me, because I knew that I was going to struggle doing the tasks that I had done previously with the injuries that I had. And Ned came out, did an evaluation with me, made recommendations to our state vocational rehab and the Michigan Department of Rehabilitative Services. And boy, those recommendations ended up turning into equipment that actually allowed me to keep operating my farm. And we're here today, Joe and I, as we're having this conversation, we're at the National AgrAbility Training Workshop in Spokane, Washington. And, you hear all these stories at this conference about people overcoming some amazing adversity. And the work that you're doing is helping that along. And so I as a AgrAbility client, I can't speak highly enough about the work that your organization is doing. And for our listeners, if you're in that situation, you need help, AgrAbility is an amazing organization to support you. And Joe is your liaison, essentially, as a veteran. So Joe, just to kind of, wrap up today's episode, how, if someone, whether they're coming out of the military or they've been out of the military for years and have experienced injuries post-service or during service, what would be the best way to get a hold of AgrAbility to start the process of having conversations about accessing services?
So agrability.org, agrability.org is really the best way to do it. There's some questions there, and not everybody has it as challenging an injury. Mm-hmm. Some people just want prevented stuff, like if you look up beekeeping in there, you'll notice there's some things that'll just help you maybe stay in beekeeping longer. Yep. Because it handles on the side of a box. Mm-hmm. Or other mechanisms. So there are tools within there too that in the toolbox, we call it the toolbox, that you can Google search maybe a particular area like arthritis. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing to just see, if you look at the ergonomics of some things, like holding a hoe differently or getting a support device, on your forearm. Mm-hmm. That will help support the weight of some things. Mm-hmm. Or even bucket lifters, right? You save your shoulders and things like that. And so AgrAbility also tries to educate, to keep people into that, hey, how do I keep my body going and healthy to go before it hits the, double shoulder arthritis and you can't lift a deep hive anymore. Yeah. Which does happen, and then we try to educate on ways to continue on, like you said, in farming. Yeah. But agrability.org is the best spot. Okay. There's an 800 number there too. They can call either one. They're usually about a 24-hour turnaround on responses. Beautiful. And my email is Ricker2, RICKER2 @purdue.edu. More than happy to help if anybody's got it. I mean, that's what we're here for. It's all about the starfish. I call it the starfish story. Have you ever heard the starfish story?
No, share that with us.
So it's a beautiful story. A girl's walking along the beach, and she sees a ton of starfish just laying on the beach. And she picks one up and throws it in, and she keeps walking, and she picks one up and throws it in. And a guy walks behind her, and he goes, "You'll never get all the starfish." And so she picks one up and she throws one in and she said, yeah, but it mattered to that starfish.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to wrap up today. Thank you, Joe, for all that you do for our veterans, for your service to our nation, and thanks for being part of the Heroes to Hives program. I'll leave it with this. So one of the most exciting things that we're able to do with Heroes to Hives is continue to develop partnerships across the country to provide on-ground instruction for our students. And I'm happy to say that Purdue has come on as a partner this year, and we'll be doing our first field day with Purdue on June 17th this year. So if you're in Indiana and you're signed up for the Heroes to Hives course, you'll be hearing more about that particular event and your ability to go to that event in the coming emails, or you might have even gotten that email, because this is going to be a podcast for our May episode. So thank you, Joe, for joining us today, and for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do too.
Absolutely. This has been Dr. Adam AgrAbility with Heroes in the Field, a Heroes to Hives podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll chat with you next time.